Buenas noches. Si usted necesita interpretación en español, en un momento usted va a poder ir al canal de español cuando termine la presentación para que yo pueda hacer la interpretación simultánea y usted pueda entender. ¿Ok? Gracias. Thank you.
Thank you, Navarre.
Yes.
Tonight's meeting is being recorded and will be available, or it's on our YouTube channel, and you can find the link later on our PTO website. Tonight, we present Evie Hanson, who's our San Mateo High School College and Financial Aid Advisor.
I'm sorry, would you just allow me to go to the Spanish channels?
Okay. Sure. Okay. So tonight we are lucky to have Evie Hanson, our San Mateo High College and Financial Aid Advisor, for part one of a 2-speaker series. And Evie is going to talk about going to college or not. This is a question many of us have, and we really appreciate your input with us, Evie. So welcome. Thank you.
Thank you for the introduction. I'm happy to be here. I see some familiar names and some new ones, so that's really awesome. I'm just going to bring up the slide deck here real quick so we can get rolling. Slideshow. Perfect. Cool. So tonight I'm very excited to have you all here. Some of you might remember that I spoke with you all about a year ago about authenticity and fit in the college process. There will be 4 or 5 slides from that slide deck making a repeat appearance because they are still relevant to what we're talking about today. So if anything looks familiar, don't think that we've just entered a loop or anything like that. Still a lot of new information you can get to today. For anyone who is interested in that authenticity or fit presentation, I know it is on the PTO YouTube page, so please feel free to go back and watch it later on if you are interested to learn a little bit more about that talk. So today, some of the things I want to talk about, besides just thinking about if college is right for a particular individual or whether it's not, is how we research colleges, how we go about making a list, where to get started. We'll talk a little about if a college is a right fit for you or not. Not as the same depth as last year, because that's a separate slide deck that's already run. But we'll talk a little about things like that I think will help steer you all in the right direction. And, when to get started, both officially and sort of unofficially. And some questions were submitted. I'm very happy to address them at the end as we go through this today. So your options, when it comes to planning for life after high school, I think historically, as far as recent history within the United States, especially in the Bay Area, it was always very college focused, of course, and that is where my expertise comes in helping students plan for life outside of college. And many different options exist for that. Of course, there's community colleges for those who maybe want to stay super local when they're starting the process, those who might be interested in learning a little bit more about themselves first. In-state public colleges, we have 2 great systems in this state, which is really awesome, both the UCs and CSU available. Many of our students, of course, look out of state and to private colleges as well. Recently, what's been really awesome to see, there's been such an uptick in conversation about the valuable alternatives that exist to college, though, because I think as a society, and I think COVID kind of sped along this process too, we've really started to realize that there is a large portion of our population that just wasn't coming out of college necessarily satisfied with that experience, and that there are many jobs that don't necessarily require a college degree. And it was sad how underserved those were before, but we're making efforts to try to turn that around. So I think historically, when we think of non-college options, since about World War II era, often military has been the main one people would think about, which is still a wonderful opportunity. But of course, beyond that, we're seeing such an uptick recently in trade schools, apprenticeship programs, certificate programs. Prior to winter break, for example, Ms. Kane had about maybe 4 or 5 different speakers coming in from various fields, such as, I think there was welders, bricklayers, plumbers, I forget the other 2, talking about their apprenticeship programs, many of which don't require college. So it's really great to see those starting to take off. Today, after talking about the question of does college make sense or not, my talk will focus a little bit more on the college side. Again, that is my role within our school. Ms. Kane, though, she is your great go-to expert on everything that when you look at the screen that falls on the right side of your screen. So there are some things to think about whether you should go to college or not. And of course, this is hardly an all-inclusive list. There are many reasons beyond this one might consider in favor of a college or not in favor of college. So for one, of course, if you have a particular dream job or career that a degree is mandatory or unofficially mandatory, then of course college is going to make a much more sense for you than if you were to not go into college. If you're somebody who has a love of learning in that formal environment, there are many people who are great about self-learning by going online, watching 1 or 2 YouTube videos, and then going down a rabbit hole of various online encyclopedias, things like that. So a lot of people do love that informal learning. If you're somebody, though, who craves that classroom discussion, you crave that environment of coming up to the front of the room and presenting your ideas, possibly having to defend them as well, that might be another indicator that you are somebody for whom college might be a appropriate fit. Of course, the college experience itself is something that is very unique. We have great school pride at San Mateo, of course, for our athletic programs and our fine arts and things like that. With all due respect to our football crowd, we can get loud, but it doesn't compare necessarily to the University of Michigan, 100,000 fans sitting in that big stadium cheering on their team Saturdays from August through November-ish. So, if you're somebody who's looking for those specific experiences that are hard to replicate outside of college, it might also make the sense for you. Fourth bullet point, I cannot stress enough. If you are going to go this route, it should really be something that you want to do for your own growth and development, not because you feel like you're doing it just because someone is forcing you to or pressuring you to. And if you're thinking about all the opportunities that lie in front of you and what paths you may or may not choose, if you cannot think of an opportunity that is a better fit for you, then it might be an indication that college is the right one for you. Makes me sound like I'm doing a recording for one of those drug commercials. If you think college is right for you, talk to your so-and-so. Should you go to college? Let's say that it might not be the right decision. A couple reasons that might sway that. For one, you might desire a career for which that is not a requirement, and there are a lot of them that are out there. But I do want to stress that if this is the case for you and your career choice does not necessarily require a degree, sometimes advancement within that field, becoming the manager, certain pay raises, things like that can still be tied to having a college degree. So just because it may not be an entry requirement, don't necessarily assume that it will never come into play later on. If you're sitting there going through applications, thinking about where you want to go and realize you're only doing this because you feel compelled to for someone else's aspirations for your life and not your own, might be an indication that college isn't necessarily the right fit for you, or maybe not at this time, but could be a little bit down the road. And if you think about your experiences in school and you think, wow, there is nothing worse than doing this again for another 4, maybe even more years, maybe another method, another route might be best for you. So let's say you've decided that going to college is what makes sense for you. You want to consider going. Where to begin researching colleges and thinking which ones make sense for you. This can be hard because there are anywhere between 4,300 and 6,000 colleges in America. It's hard to pinpoint an exact number because when you Google it, every website that gives a number is going to have a different metric for what they consider a college. I would say most standard definitions I hear fall between 4,500 and 5,000, with roughly 1,100 of those being community college. So how do we even begin thinking about that? Well, for one, obviously you want to make sure that you're only thinking about schools that have what you're interested in studying. There are some degrees that are very specialized that you might only be able to get at 1 or 2, 3, 4 schools across the country or world. But there are many degrees, psychology, business, English, that you'll find at a wide variety of schools. So you have many opportunities to fulfill what you're hoping to get out of that schooling experience. So something I kind of encourage people to think about is think beyond the education and building your list. Because wherever you go, you're going to be there for a handful of years, thinking of it as not just an educational institution, but a home. So you want to be happy with what you're getting out of that entire experience. So some things to think about before we start trying to craft a list and narrow it down. What are things that are of interest to you? Deal breakers, requirements, whatever. Do you want to start with a 4-year school or community college? If you want to start with community college, you can certainly go far away. Most people do stay close to home for that, so that would instantly shrink your list a bit for starting. Do you want to go far and have that experience being super far away and racking up a lot of air miles? Do you want to stay in a large urban city environment, or does a rural experience call to you? And weather, I cannot stress this enough. Yes, we're getting winter the last couple weeks. Our winter is nothing like you would get in Minnesota or Buffalo. So if you're thinking of one of those schools, be prepared for something you have not necessarily experienced firsthand if your entire life has been spent here in the Bay Area, and what that means for you in terms of getting around. Are you interested in a religious institution or regional politics as well? And I don't mean necessarily getting involved in running or campaigning, though that may be something you're interested in down the road. What I mean is, of course, not to drive further to like blue and red divides, but while colleges generally, of course, historically are more progressive than their surrounding communities, more inclusive, sometimes the things they want to do are hamstrung a little bit by what the local laws of the particular state, county, whatever might permit. So things to think about, is the school able to take like assault charges seriously and things like that? Or does the state really tie their hands on that? If you're somebody who might be a person of color, a woman, LGBTQIA plus member, or somebody else from a marginalized background, historically marginalized background, you might want to consider, how safe is it necessarily for you in that area? Even if the school itself is saying the right things, the surrounding area is something you might need to consider as well. Okay, I want to warn you all about a fallacy here. A lot of times people research colleges, they often think about looking at these ranking lists. US News is one of the most well-known ranking lists out there. So people make their list, excuse me, sometimes they're saying, oh, this school's #1 for this particular ranking. I should have it on my list. Those ranking lists can be a good place to say, let me start by researching these schools if you are truly not sure where to start. But if you build your list just because something is on a ranking list, you kind of run into a little bit of a problem. And the example, and this is one that might be familiar to you all if you attended last year's presentation. Let's say you're planning a vacation. US News, they rank not just colleges, vacation destinations too. And they declared in 2022, they did this in 2021 as well, that the Grand Canyon was what they deemed the #1 best vacation destination in the United States. And it is truly beautiful. If you've never been there, I would definitely suggest trying to go if the opportunity ever presents itself. But let's say in the course of you planning your vacation and you have the budget maybe for one vacation this calendar year, you really want to go to the beach. You want to look out, you want to see waves, you want to go swimming, you want to see your feet, so you want a nice clean beach, you want to drink drinks that are like straws with all the little twirls, whatever they got. If you were to go to the Grand Canyon just because it's deemed the best vacation destination, was it really the right vacation for you? Of course not. You missed out on getting what you wanted out of that vacation experience because you felt compelled to go to what is the #1 vacation destination. And just because it was right for a lot of other people, that doesn't automatically mean that it was right for you. So when you're building your lists, I definitely strongly encourage you to, sure, use those rankings as a guide, but don't put a school on your list just because it's on the ranking. Okay. Some other places I like to point people to get started to go from these thousands of schools to a hopefully much more smaller manageable number. Within our Naviance that all students in our district have access to, you're able to log in and go through a nice college search tool where you have an opportunity to indicate the things that you want from a college in terms of size of the campus, the states you're willing to go to, stuff like that. And it takes this list of thousands of colleges and begins to narrow them down and shows you a list of schools that meet your criteria. Doesn't mean that they're going to be on your final list, but it's a nice starting point to say, all right, here's a school that I might want to start researching a little bit more. College Board, big future. I do take a lot of reservations with the way College Board says they're nonprofit, but loves to make so much money off those standardized tests and the APs, but something that they do well, and I will give credit where due. Their Big Future College Search Tool, which is a free thing, create account to do, does help point students to some good results for those individuals. Additionally, if you kind of aren't really sure what you like on a campus, what you don't, you could also start by looking at all the CSUs and UCs right here in California, looking at each campus a little bit and starting to get a sense of which ones you like and which ones you don't, as that can help point you in the right direction, not just if you're looking at in-state schools, but for things you would want or not want out of other schools. Okay, so let's pretend you've gone through some of this research and you've been able to craft a bit of a list. How do you determine if this school should stay on your list or not? Some of the things you can definitely do when it's possible, try to visit a campus. Like, I totally get that it's not always possible. Some schools are super far away. Your schedule doesn't permit a trip until they're on break, something like that. So this is a nice thing, but by no means a requirement. If you do get to visit the campus, don't just do the organized tour. Like, yes, do that. You'll learn some stuff, but try to spend some time on campus either beforehand or afterwards, just strolling around at your own pace, sit in the student center a bit or one of the crowded quads. Try to get a sense of the vibe on there and see if it's something that really feels like you're kind of a fit. When a college comes to visit at San Mateo High School, maybe it's part of the fall when they come do their visits in the Career Center, or maybe it's in October at our district college fair. Try to come down to the presentation or try to meet the rep at the table. It's a great opportunity to hear a little bit more at the school and to ask the questions you might have and be thinking about. And one thing that is nice if you cannot get to the campus in person, virtual visits. Only a few schools, I think, did this well pre-COVID. Many do it well now. They kind of had to in order to survive and still recruit students. So there's, like 97% over a cough that I had like 3 weeks ago. College virtual visits have come a long way in terms of providing something valuable for the students to get a sense for that campus. So that's something you can always do as well. And something that I always love to try to point people towards is researching the culture of the school to see if it really is something you'd be happy at. And two ways I kind of point people towards that. One, the social media pages for a college. Now, of course, the stuff the college posts themselves, they're going to do what they can to put themselves in a positive light. So what you can do is definitely watch the video, Instagram, look at the post, but then scroll down to the comments and kind of just see what kind of feedback are they getting. Do the students seem like that they're excited, genuinely engaging? Are they kind of critical and feel like the administration there is maybe not best representing them? And where this really kind of has a chance to kind of shine, both positively and negatively for certain schools, is within their school newspaper. I think the screenshot I took there is from, I want to say it was the University of Arizona's school newspaper, student newspaper. And every college, even the safest ones, sadly, they're going to have stories of situations where there might have been assault on campus or a club thought they were being funny and did something that I don't know, maybe being pretty minimally to overtly racist. When those things happen, though, are the colleges actually taking it seriously? Like, do the students on campus feel that, hey, I feel supported by this administration. I see they are taking things seriously to fix it. I feel like this culture is a good fit. Or do you see comments in those news stories where students are saying like, oh, Dr. So-and-so, once again, just puts their fingers up and doesn't do anything, their hands up and doesn't do anything. So that is a great opportunity to learn a little bit more about the college campus and the culture and vibe to see if it's something you would really be comfortable at. So fit, there's a lot of things that go into it. Academics, of course, there's a particular major you want to make sure they have it, and it is up to your standards where you're hoping to get out of that educational journey. Social and cultural mix, we talked about a little bit. Mentioned location a few slides ago. People often kind of forget to think about finances in this part of the process. So I hate when there are stories of a student who gets a school on their list, they love the school, but then they wind up realizing that it's not necessarily affordable. So there are things you can do earlier in the process to find out, where it fits up for you. Something I really love to encourage you to take a look at, and you can do this in all grade levels, it's not just something for seniors, is the net price calculator. Every college by law is required to have this on their website. They don't always make it the easiest to find, but they are required to have it on their website. And what it is, it's a place where you can put in some information about yourself, your family income level. You can put in your GPA, test scores, their school looks at that, stuff like that. And then they will give you an idea of what your financial aid offer might eventually look like should you apply to the school and get accepted. Obviously, it's not set in stone. It can change as time comes up and you actually do apply for real, but it can begin to give you an earlier opportunity to see if this is a school that would be reasonable and affordable for you to attend. Now, I do want to say, if you're filling it out at a younger grade level, and you haven't really had a chance to take APs yet because you're not to the point yet where that's offered to you too much, if they ask for weighted GPA, you might find that you don't get as much merit aid as you want, which is okay. As you eventually get to the point that you could take more APs with us and have a chance to boost up that GPA, you have an opportunity to potentially see merit aid opportunities begin to rise with those schools as well. Okay. So you found a bunch of schools. You like them. You want them to be on your list. Yay, that's awesome. We also now need to figure out, where do they fit? Are they reach schools or target schools or safety schools? And I don't like the term safety school, but I'll explain why when we get to that one. A reach school, I think a lot of people will see it as a school where your odds of getting in are not that high. And that could happen for a wide variety of reasons. It might be that your GPA and test scores, if they require them, fall a bit below what is typically accepted. Or you could have grades and test scores that are right there in line with what students normally have when they get accepted. But if that school is still only accepting about 5% of applicants, it's not going to be a target for you. It's going to be a reach. Even a school where you might be right in the realm of the typically accepted student, you also need to account for if you're applying for a major that is super selective, So there could be times you might apply to a school that accepts let's say 45% of their applicants, but you want to go to a major like nursing or something like that takes only 5%. Even though it might have been a target if you're applying for any other major. If you're applying for nursing, then it might be something that gets shuffled over to the reach side for you. A target school is going to be based on admissions data. Somebody with your academic profile, we anticipate would likely be a minute. No guarantee, but we would see more yeses and nos for where you're at. And then if it's a safety school, that generally historically refers to a school where, based on your academic profile, the odds are almost certainly you're going to be accepted. Now, that's where a lot of people kind of stop their thought process on safety school. They don't think about if you'd actually be happy to attend and could reasonably afford to attend, which is why I don't like to use the term safety school. I like to instead call them yes schools, and I cannot take credit for this. I heard it at a conference like 3 years ago from a counselor somewhere else. I cannot remember her name, but don't give me credit for this. But basically, can you say, yes, I want to attend the college if I get accepted. Yes, I am likely to be accepted. And yes, I can reasonably afford to attend the college. And if you could say yes to all of these, then they can fit the criteria of a traditional safety school for your list. In my opinion, I feel like students should have at least 2 of these on their list. When you look historically at people in my field, they would say that for every 10 schools you have, your list should be something like 2 reaches, 2 safeties, 6 targets. And that is the conventional advice. As far as I'm concerned, as long as you have at least 2 yes schools, I think how you distribute reaches and targets doesn't really need to be set in stone. It can vary on the individual and what you're hoping to get out of this process. Just understand that if you decide to have a list that's like 80% reach schools, obviously your mental health way better than I would know your mental health. So if you're going to have a list like that, you just need to be somebody who knows you're probably going to hear more no's than yeses and can be okay with that. And community college can certainly be your yes school if that is something you are willing to consider. Now, classifying schools to figure out where they fit within this criteria. Couple places you can do that. Our Naviance Scattergrams. So if you go in there and look up at a college, assuming we have a statistically significant data set, which I think is at least 3 applicants over the last 6 years, it will plot GPAs and test scores where applicable to show you if a student got in or not. So what it might look like for a reach on the left side of the screen, the little blue circle there would represent this hypothetical student. And you can see, this school has a lot of reds, but also the people who are close to the student, they have a lot of reds as well. So I wouldn't say the student shouldn't apply if they really want to, but it definitely would fit in the reach category. The target one in the middle, if you find the blue, it might be hard to see. I don't know if my mouse comes through on the screen sharing, but it's right around, I think at 1200 if you look up. That student is surrounded by a lot more greens. There's a few reds in there. Purples mean students who indicate they applied at the school, but have not heard a decision yet. So in all likelihood, the purples probably are students from this current class because many of them haven't heard yet for a lot of their schools. And then the yes, yes, yes safety school over the right hand of the screen, you're going to see that that person is surrounded by a lot of greens. The nearest red is miles away. So in this case, that is a yes, yes, yes school for that student. Now, if you wanted to look at a school that we don't have a statistically significant data set, some colleges have, they don't all make it the easiest to find, but they have admitted student profiles. They're not required by law, unlike a net price calculator. So there's a few that don't do this, but many do. And it shows either the most recent or a fairly recent accepted class. And it shows things like their overall GPA, their test scores, a little bit of their geographic breakdown and things like that. So it's not a perfect apples to apples comparison, because on the scattergram, you get to kind of see how you stack up with students who had similar course opportunities as you. But this can still help the admitted student profile in giving some sense of where you might fall and where you should put it on your respective list. So what do colleges want? A lot of it, I think people kind of can think of offhand: GPA, test scores for those schools that do want that. Required courses, by that I mean like UCs and CSUs have their AG requirements, for example. Many public university schools throughout America have their own version of required courses that might be dictated by the state, may not. Private schools will sometimes listed as well, but not as often. They might have a little more flexibility in what they require. Of course, activities, extracurriculars, if you're able to be involved. I always tell people, try to pick things that you are genuinely interested in. I'll talk more about that in about 2 slides from now. And demonstrated interest, the bottom bullet point there. Not every college does this, just some, but what that is for colleges that do track that means they're going to keep track of things like, I'm a rep from random university school, whatever, and I come to San Mateo to do a visit. I'm going to log in my system which students attended, which students who maybe did not attend, but took the time to send me an email afterwards, say, hey, I want to learn more about your school. Sorry, I couldn't make it today, whatever. And then in my system, I'm going to log, these students have expressed to me an interest in our school. So now when I'm reviewing applications, I might be more inclined to give those students, I would be more inclined if I do demonstrate interest to give those students applications more of a boost. What do colleges really want? Authenticity, which again is something you can get more in depth from the presentation I did roughly this time ago last year. But what it boils down to is when students are doing their extracurriculars, they're taking courses, signing for volunteering, whatever. I always try to guide students to doing what they are most interested in, because to me, if you take that mindset, as opposed to say, how can I just fill my schedule as much as possible? By trying to find things that are of genuine interest to you, you're probably going to start at activity A. You might find an activity B that's a natural segue point from activity A. And now you're starting to build up an application without it even being necessarily your goal. You're building up an application that is a lot more in line with who you are as a person and what you are really passionate about. And what happens then is that you are going to want to invest more hours in whatever it is you're doing. You're going to be more interested potentially in picking up higher responsibility, higher roles. If you ask anyone from that organization to write you a letter of rec, they're probably going to write more glowing things because they are really seeing that shine through on you. And then when you eventually are applying and you're writing about your passions and interests and potential long-term goals, there's a decent chance that they are going to tie into all the stuff that you've been doing. And it just makes an application profile that looks impressive and, in my opinion, very authentic. So when do you start? I'll give you the technical answer first. Common App, UC applications, they do open in the summer between 11th and 12th grades. CSU apps as of now do not open until October senior year. Maybe one point in the future they'll make it summer, but as of now, it's still October. Local community colleges, so for those looking at CSM, Skyline, Kenyatta, those applications open late fall semester of senior year. Most apply in the spring. If you're looking at like a Foothill, City College of San Francisco, if your family's moving to like SoCal and you're applying to college there, I've noticed in those cases, usually those applications don't open until spring semester. But of course, that would vary a little bit from one community college district to another. Okay. Now, when do you kind of start unofficially, if you will? Junior family night is often kind of like the unofficial kickoff for a lot of our families, and that is typically held in late January, early February. And that is when me, along with the counselor that is assigned to that junior class, we will typically have a presentation by Zoom that is, of course, recorded for those who cannot attend. We talk about the college process, how to apply, when to apply, key deadlines, stuff like that. I don't think it's been announced yet, because I think hasn't been 100% confirmed, but like 98% likely that this year's junior family night is going to be February 7th in the evening. Me and Ms. Gasco are meeting later this week, so that should be finalized by the end of this week. But for any juniors or parents of juniors, something to be aware of. Of course, students can start researching schools anytime they want, but oftentimes after you complete that 5th semester. So I'd be referring to juniors now in the spring semester. They can have a start to form a really good sense of kind of where they stack up academically for many schools out there. So that becomes a great time for students to begin doing some of that initial research. It's also the semester where you're going to start asking the appropriate junior teachers for letters of rec. And then summer between junior and senior, I do strongly suggest that you spend some of your time working on your Common App essay drafts, personal insight questions, and supplemental essays for any schools that might ask you to do so. Of course, I want to stress there isn't necessarily a date that things have to be totally finalized. Of course, you can't go after the deadline of school, but outside that, you can continue to build or subtract from your college application list into senior year. We still have students here. We are, what's today, January 17th. So spring semester has been underway for like 2-ish weeks. We still have students who are like, hey, Ms. Hanson, I decided there's a school I'm not applying to. Can you take it off my Naviance list? Or I get emails like, hey, last night I just added blah, blah, blah school. Can you send my transcript and all that relevant stuff? So you still have an opportunity to keep adding and subtracting through senior year. Don't ever feel like you're at a point where things have to be totally finalized. And something for parents, if you are curious about the application, I would suggest. I know you definitely want to ask your students in senior year how things are going, and that's fine. But if you want to see for yourself the applications, you can create your own accounts for UCs, for CSUs, for Common Apps. So you can navigate back and forth and see what kind of questions that your particular students are being asked. It's a great way to avoid reactions like the eye roll from the student here in this particular picture. So you can kind of look through yourself when you have particular questions about the formatting and stuff like that. And it's totally free to create the account. You don't spend anything until you actually click submit, so please don't take it that far. But feel free to work on the application up to that point to get a sense of what it looks like. And that is the last slide that I have. And I know there were some questions submitted. I'm not sure if you want me to just go through them, if you want to read them. Some of them, I don't know if any naturally were addressed.
Yeah. What works better for you, Evie? I see how like some of them are very like job related, and there's some more like school class specific questions.
I'll go through them in order. I did see someone did private message me as well. I'll read that question after we go through the ones on the deck that were submitted or through the Google Sheet. Now, some of these on the Google Sheet, I will be honest, are Miss Kane questions. So some I have some answer to, some I might tell you, gotta talk to her. So let's see. First one. We're gonna go in a different order, but I'll get to them all. So these two questions I'm gonna kind of combine because they have, for me, I think similar answers. So the question is, what jobs are relevant or growing with today's events like COVID? And what job market is growing? So they're both kind of related. I think Ms. Kane will know better about the specific trade jobs that are growing, but I kind of want to build off that answer. There are a lot of industries that even if the industry itself is not necessarily growing, the need could be growing without necessarily the need. So what I mean by that is like there's several trade programs out there where the majority of the workers are on a much older age within the population compared to the population at whole. So in those instances, you know, there may not necessarily be an increased demand for that specific job as far as the number of people paying for it, but there's less workers to do it. So the need to hire, that demand is going up. So I think if you're looking for growing job markets, I would definitely encourage you to try to see, look into the industries for which the workforce is getting close to retirement age, and there becomes that need to have to kind of like replace very soon. Let's see. Can one compete in today's career market without a college degree? So the answer is yes. Part of that is that there are a lot of companies right now that are dropping the requirement of a college degree, companies and industries. And that's happened in the last couple of years as we've seen the unemployment rate now, I think, hovering something like 3% or whatever for a relatively consistent period of time. So a lot of companies, a lot of industries are having a hard time hiring people. So they have to kind of like bring down what they're asking. Now, of course, it's hard to predict if it's going to stay that way long term. You know, and even within that, I wouldn't presume that lost my train of thought. I have wording here. Here we go. Just because you might be able to get into it without the degree, keep in mind what I said earlier. Promotions, salary increases can still be tied to having a degree. So there's it's definitely not impossible to find a great career without a college degree, or the military, but rising up in those fields might be hampered in certain cases. All right, how many hours can a student work? Good question. So hopefully you all know, if not, you're gonna learn now. Students do need a work permit to work while they are in high school. That is something they get from the Career Center. And then me or Ms. Kane will go ahead and file that for them. And there are limits to the number of hours they can work. They are set by state law. It does vary by age. I don't know the total numbers offhand. I believe the maximum level that you hit once you're 17 for sure, maybe 16 as well, is 48 hours a week and 4 hours on a school day. Yes, and it does, when we issue the work permit that the student brings back to the employer, it does list those hour limits on there, so the employer should know, and if they are making your child work more, they don't really have an excuse to plead ignorance on that. Can certain jobs give school credit? Great question. I'm going to say it again. Can certain jobs give school credit? Right now, the answer is unfortunately no. That is something that has existed in the past, and I know some other districts do currently have it. This is something that I know Ms. Kane and others in our district who have stakes in the CTE programs have expressed an interest in. And I do think there's tremendous value in this, but unfortunately, Ms. Kane and the others within CTE, the requests have not gone the direction necessarily that they'd like from the district yet. So if that is something that you're hearing this and you think, hey, that's great, we should have that, I would love for y'all to speak up to the district, because definitely if we have parents clamoring for it as well, they will hopefully be a little more responsive or invest more time in thinking about how that could work from a practical perspective. Okay, let's see. Okay, a lot of questions came as we went, so I'm going to take a moment to just skim these real quick. Guys, because we're doing this over. Okay. Let me just try to go in order on these then. Okay. One person said, how can a student become a competitive candidate with minimal job experience? I'm going to assume if you're referencing job experience, you mean a competitive candidate for a particular job. That would vary, in my opinion, a little bit by industry in terms of we're looking at jobs. I think things they can do, though, would be when it comes to the application and eventual interview process, should they get an interview, is I would definitely recommend that they highlight whatever transferable skills they've had elsewhere that would apply into the job, or just industry in general. That's something I think Ms. Kane would probably be able to elaborate a little bit further upon, but that's something I would definitely suggest on that. My student does not know what he wants to do. Any advice on how to help him decide? Great question. I think there's no one perfect answer. You know, if the student, assuming they are also interested, he is also interested in trying to figure this out. And it's not just a one-sided driven conversation. I know there are some career interest profile tests and quizzes within Naviance that could be a nice starting point to begin to learn what kind of jobs might fit the student's personality. So I might suggest maybe starting there, and then based off of that, conversation with me or Ms. Kane could be a next step. Are there some trades where they can get experience without having gone to trade school to see if that's what they want to do? Good question. I'm just going to be totally honest. That is a 100% Miss Kane question. I do not know offhand, so I don't want to give you a made up answer on the spot. I would definitely suggest talking to her for that. Do you help write resumes? If not, where can they go to help develop a resume without having experience? Ms. Kane does help students write resumes. I can review them as well. I know she does that a little bit more with students, so I definitely suggest chatting with her about that. All right, let's see. 5, 6, 7. All right, let me see what's coming in the chat, and I'll go back to the sheet. Sure, juniors have already been meeting with you, and or how often if they're still deciding colleges or trades. I think they're not required to meet with me yet or Ms. Kane. It's just an option available for them. I think at this point, since we have junior family night scheduled for February 7th, if a junior reached out for a meeting, what I suggest so we can be best productive with our meeting would be at this point, attend February 7th first, kind of learn some starting information. And I think from there, scheduling an appointment with me or Ms. Keen from February 8th onward, because then some of your basic questions might already be answered in the presentation, and then we can spend our time meeting to go more in-depth questions, whatever follow-up questions you might have for them. Of course, if you have a time-sensitive thing you want to talk about, please feel free to schedule a meeting prior. When is the next college fair set for? So those are, it's not set yet. So we don't actually pick the date. The state, there's like a board that oversees it, I think, to make sure that colleges can get to as many school districts as possible. So we get told the date, usually in late March is when we're told the date for October. I'd say historically, I've seen the range being over like October 16th through October 22nd. So I'd anticipate something similar for this coming year. Okay. Let's see. What are requirements for work permit? Good questions. You have to be at least 14. You need to have a 2.0 GPA. And your most recent 6-week grades need to not have more than 2 Ds on, or sorry, cannot have more than 1 D or F. If you do not meet that grade requirement, you can talk with your school counselor. They can authorize me or Ms. Kane to issue it, but we definitely want you to have that conversation first to make sure the job will not be a hindrance for you in getting your grades back up. My daughter's interested in culinary. What would typo there? What either best option? What would be her best option? I think the person meant to write. There are culinary schools that are out there that can be a great fit for people. I know Ms. Kane has worked with some students plenty that way. I think Ms. Casali has worked with some students that way too, and myself. So I think first meeting with us to kind of so we can get a sense of what it is you're hoping to get out of that process. If you want to stay domestically, some people go international. So I think the best start is for us to get to know a little bit more about the scope of that goals. Someone asked, how much should I worry about my GPA? It's hard to answer for sure without knowing what your necessarily long-term goals are or short-term goals. But I will say, even if your GPA is not up to where you would like it to be, I don't know grade levels, so I don't know how much time you have to necessarily turn it around. But there are college options for everyone, regardless of GPA. So if that is your option, if that is your goal, you're not like, you haven't like permanently shut the door on the future or anything like that. If you're interested in trades, the requirements are a little different. Certainly they like to see people who have some knowledge coming in, but typically if you have your high school diploma, meeting a few other requirements that they might set as well, you should be going in the right direction. Ms. Kane can attest a little bit more to that part. Okay. 5 more questions. Let's see. The UCs do not have a business major. Instead, they have an econ major. What if I don't want to take econ, but still take something similar to business? Good questions. So I guess what I would suggest is, for one, read about the econ program at a specific school to see what it is they study and don't. Any major, econ, business, psychology, whatever. There are variations to precisely how it is taught at different school, as far as what things they might choose to focus a little more emphasis on and things like that. So econ at one school might have a little bit more of a business involvement than another. So it might still reach what you're looking for. Now, if you don't want anything to do with econ and you really want to stick with business, and there's a school that I would suggest maybe looking at other majors on campus that might tie into business, marketing, advertising, stuff like that. At the end of the day, though, this question was about UCs. This is where it comes down to, are you interested in a particular major or a particular campus? And, if you are somebody who's more interested in a specific major, I wouldn't be so focused necessarily on saying I need to apply to this specific school. I would say, does this school have what I want? If not, then maybe it's not the right fit for you. Is SAT score taken into consideration for college admission? Depends on the school. So UCs and CSUs are test blind now. That is not changing anytime in the near future. Beyond that, some schools are test optional, some are test blind, some are test mandatory. So it does just vary based on what you're looking for. What do you recommend high school sophomores should be doing during the summer? Good question. I think during the summer, just anything that's kind of like meaningful for the students. So it might just be continue volunteer hours for what's meaningful to you. If you are interested in doing something academic related, you could take a community college course. That's always an option as well. I think I mentioned volunteering. Extracurriculars, if you have an extracurricular, you can continue to expand upon over the summer. So maybe you do a sport, continue to practice, you can get a part-time job. That counts as an extracurricular for college applications as well. Let's see. As a parent, how can we best get timely communications to make sure our junior doesn't miss any opportunities or deadlines? Good question. So whether it be me or Miss Gasco or whomever, we will send, there's no specific sign-up list you have to be on. When it's a Canvas message or the communications tool that sends you all the text messages, stuff like that. If your child's actually a junior, you will be getting the stuff that is specific to for that class to know. Some communication with students, I might just send to the entire student body of a grade. Some I will send to parents. Again, it depends on what kind of information it is. If we're advertising an event like a junior family night, a financial aid presentation, as your students start getting closer to senior year, stuff like that, that's going to be including in the school bulletin, messages, parents, and things like that. And the last question. I think there's a community college to UC track option wherein a student can attend a community college and then get preferred or guaranteed admissions to UC. Is that still a thing? Yes, it is, but not every UC. So right now, and it can always change, but it's been consistent for a number of years now, 6 UCs participate. So I'll give you a list of those who don't, because that's a shorter list. Berkeley, San Diego, and LA do not participate. However, that does not mean that a student cannot apply to the school. So let's say you want to go to community college and be on a guaranteed transfer program with, say, UC Irvine. You do what's required and apply, you're in Irvine. But you can also apply to UCLA, UC Berkeley, San Diego, random schools in other states. And once you get your admissions or not admissions, hopefully some more admissions than not, you can then make a choice based upon those admissions in front of you. Are you interested in them? So do you want to take that or go back to Irvine like you had planned before? So yes, that still does exist. And now, Flor, I think we have caught up on the questions, and I will catch my breath for a sec. You're on mute.
Okay, there we go. Any more last minute questions? Let me just take one more look at the list here. It looks like, do you need a 4.0 to apply to SDSU or Cal Poly? Just appeared.
So technically that's not the minimum GPA for a CSU. It is a two-part answer. 2.5 is a minimum to be like guaranteed eligible. 2.0 is they say you can apply and they will factor other stuff realistically. But 2.5 is really what I'm pursuing for. Now, of course, some CSUs are more competitive than others. You mentioned 2 of the more competitive ones. So, I mean, yes, of course, higher GPA are going to be better, but they are also going to look to see if you've taken courses that are relevant to, your major and stuff like that. And the exact cutoff can vary major to major as well. So, you don't need a 4.0 to be able to apply and still be able to have it on your list without us saying, oh, that's a real long shot. Like, there's a lot that does get factored in. So,
That makes sense. Thank you so much. And thank you for tackling every question there. If there are more questions that come in, would you suggest like emailing or making an appointment with you, or either way?
Yeah, so you can email me your questions. I do have an appointment link on our school website. So if you go to the school website at the top where it says counseling, when the drop down comes, you click Career Center or College and Career Center. You'll see a link near the top of the page for both my appointment page and Miss Kane's appointment page.
Okay, great. Taking one more look here. It looks like that's all the questions there. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
I think that would bring our meeting to a close. And thank you to everyone for attending, and especially to you, Evie, for being here and speaking. So I'll call the meeting adjourned. It's now 7:53, and thanks again.
Thank you for having me. Have a good night, everyone.
Good night.
Bye.